Hey, and welcome back to the Music History Project. Today you're in for a treat. It's our favorite web clips.
Yay!
Hooray!
Welcome to the Music History Project. We're your hosts. I'm Elizabeth Dale.
And Dan Del Fiorentino.
And Mike Mullins.
All of our content comes from the Oral History Program, which is sponsored by NAMM, the National Association of Music Merchants. And that is a program that is over 3,000 interviews and constantly growing. If you want to check out any of our content or any of the other interviews that aren't featured, please check out our website at www.namm.org/library. Hey, thanks for joining us. It's exciting today because we're going to be talking our favorite web clips, as you heard from that intro. With over 3,000 interviews and counting, we're closing in on that 4,000 mark. We thought it would be kind of exciting to take a minute for each of us to discuss some of our favorites in the collection.
Yeah, and I'm super excited, even though it's almost impossible to pick favorites. It's like picking a favorite kid, but we were able to do it.
When you have almost 4,000 kids.
So many jokes that I won't make.
So, Mike, tell us, what exactly is a web clip?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Dan. A web clip is what we post on the website. It's a short segment of an interview, usually between 3 and 6 minutes long. And we try not to make these just summaries of the interview, because the interviews usually range between 45 minutes upwards of 2 hours.
4 hours.
Yeah, it can go on for a while. So we try not to just summarize the interview in the web clip. We try to find either a very cool story or just kind of take a piece of whoever's talking, a piece of their history, and we display that on the website.
So our goal for this podcast was to choose a few that we really like, that we think are kind of our favorites or quintessential to the collection. And I think we're going to start with one of mine. Is that right?
Yeah, we, of course, had to let Dan pick more than Mike and I got to pick. This was a lengthy discussion this morning. But we figure since Dan is responsible for the 3,000 plus going on 4,000, he should have a little bit more of a say of his favorites. So the first one is one of his favorites, and that is...
This is a web clip taken from an interview conducted here in San Diego with two of the original founders of one of the great funk bands of the 70s called Tower of Power. These are two of the horn players. Emilio Castillo is the trumpeter, and Doc Kupka is the saxophonist. And together they sat down and talked about how that band got started. And I always love this clip. This is a real great example of the role of the baritone saxophone in a funk band. So let's get started with this web clip.
He came up to me after the show and he goes, hey, he says, your band sounds pretty good. You know, I go, oh, thanks a lot. He says, it's only one thing wrong. I go, oh, what's that? He says, your horn section. I go, what's wrong with the horn section? You know, we were tight by then, you know. Skip Mesquite was in the band, Mick Gillette, you know. We sounded good. He goes, your horn section has no bottom. He goes, you need some bottom. He goes, by the way, I play the baritone saxophone. And he says, I have a Selmer with a low A key. And I had just heard about this Selmer baritone saxophone that had a low A, you know, because up till then, all saxophones, you could only go down to B flat, you know. And on a baritone, the low A, and that meant you could play in the key of C and hit that low A, you'd be on the, you know. I was like, really? You know, he goes, yeah, you know. He goes, why don't you let me audition for your band? And at the time, we had been thinking about adding a horn, and we had been auditioning these trombone players. We thought a trombone would fatten up our section. And we would get these guys from school, you know, because we were still in high school. We would get these guys from like marching band and stuff, you know, and we'd try to hip them up and show them how to do steps and teach them parts. And it was just a lost cause. These guys were totally unsoulful. And, you know, we were already tight. We had our thing down. And so we had all just agreed as a band, no more square horn players. You know, we're not going to try to hip up the world anymore. We're just going to stay as we are. You know, it's tight. Don't mess with it. And that's when Doc hit on me for the audition, and I said, you know, before he just had something about his personality. It was, you know, he's a character, you know. And I said, yeah, you can come Tuesday. I gave him the address, you know, and I forgot about it. And we used to rehearse. My dad had redone the garage. You know, there was instead of a garage door, he put in 2 big regular doors with windows on them, you know, and you opened it with a doorknob. It pulled out, you know. But the door was like jammed. You could never open it. And there was 2 windows on the side of it, and we used to always crawl through the window to get in there. You know, we'd pull up the window and crawl through. And so we're in there rehearsing. You know, we had like this half-moon stage my dad had built for us, you know, and we're in there rehearsing, and all of a sudden, there's a knock on the door, you know, and somebody's, you know, and I stop the band, and I go through the window, you know, and tries the door some more. I go through the window. And then here comes Doc. He goes to the window. He's got this huge baritone sax, and it's this disgusting old case, all dilapidated. It turns out his Selmer baritone sax had gotten stranded in Tahoe with the loading zone's broke down truck. So he shows up with this hopeless baritone saxophone. It was just rank, you know. So he's got this old case. He's the first hippie we had ever known. You know, he shows up and he's just bedraggled, skinny as a rail, Biafra time, you know. And he's at the window, and he's, you know, I go, come through the window. He looks at me. So I open the window. I go, you got to come through the window. The door don't work. He goes, oh, and so you got a picture. You know, we're all a bunch of little slick Vato, razor-cutted, you know, suit-wearing kids, you know, in Fremont, California. And here's this hippie with this broke-down sax trying to get through this window. He's way taller than any of us, you know. And he comes in, and the guys all, it was like unison, you know, they all look at me, like, what's this? You know? And I go, sorry, guys. I told this guy he could audition. Not what they wanted to hear, you know. I go, man, I forgot, man. He was with the loading zone. Remember the loading zone? They're like, what are you doing, man? We told you we don't want to, you know, any of these weird horn players anymore. We need to, you know, learn these songs. We got work to do, blah, blah, blah. I go, look, man, he drove here from Berkeley. Okay, let's at least let the guy play a few tunes, you know. And he comes in, and everybody's upset, man, you know, really uptight. And so we had a list of songs, and I show him the list. And I go, you know any of these songs? And he goes, yeah, Philly Dog, Cold Sweat, Tell Mama. He goes, yeah, I know those songs. I go, okay. I go, let's do Philly Dog, you know. So we start out, you know, it was this tune by the Marquis, you know. Go dun 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 ba da 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 dun dun ba da da da, you know. But now it's ba da 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 dum boom boom da 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 dum, you know. As soon as he did that dum, the guys just look, you know. And we got to that tune, and all of a sudden the tune's starting to change, you know, they're kind of like, you know. So then we do Tell Mama, and Tell Mama was this really cool song by Etta James, you know. And whenever it got to the chorus, it used to go, Tell Mama, da-da-da-da-da, all about it, da-da-da-da-da, Tell Mama, da-da-da-da. But now it was, Tell Mama, da-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-um, da-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-um, da-da. And man, everybody's eyes got real wide, you know. And then we hit Cold Sweat, and, you know, before it was like, ba-da, ba-da, you know, now it's ba-dum, ba-da, ba-dum, ba-da, you know, and everybody's eyes are wide, you know, and my dad walks out. And my father comes into the garage, and he says, Emilio, come into the kitchen, I want to talk to you. And my dad never interfered with the band, you know, so I thought I got in trouble or something, you know. And I walk in, and he goes, hire this guy. He's got something. And I go, he does, huh? And so I walk out. I told everybody, rehearsal's over. He's in the band. That's it. And that was how Doc got in the band.
I told you that would not disappoint. I love that clip. First of all, he uses words that I'm not sure really exist, but he is really, really good at telling a story.
Yeah, and that word we were wondering about was bedraggled, which I looked up, and it does exist.
Oh, good.
It means disheveled, disordered, untidy, unkempt, tousled, disarranged, in a mess. Must.
It's a good word.
Amelia's got some pretty good vocabulary there.
Yeah, artist through and through.
A fun way to describe that story. You could just picture it all happening.
Well, clearly a very animated guy, like captivating. So you can tell from that clip alone, stage presence is just through the roof.
And if you don't really pay attention to the role of the baritone sax, you don't really understand the importance of it until somebody like that describes it in a way that he did. And I really appreciate that. That's pretty neat.
And can we also mention how when we were sitting down to plan this podcast out, Dan had to pick 3, and he, even though Doc wasn't on that audio with Emilio, he snuck an extra one in there. I did notice that. So that was a great first favorite web clip from Dan, and I think now we get to move to one that Mike and I picked. Our choices are conjoined.
Yeah, because we've kind of been here the same amount of time, so we've seen the same things.
Yeah, so who do you want to start with?
Yeah, what'd you guys pick?
Let's see. Well, maybe we can start with your main pick.
My main pick?
Yeah.
So my main pick is very exciting to me, and because I think the story she tells is just great, and it's Dan's interview from 2017 with Lita Ford. Dan, do you want to give a little background about where, when, how, why, who, what, where, when, why?
Grew up just absolutely in love with the Runaways. So when I had an opportunity to interview her, I was thrilled about it. And this was several years ago. But that particular interview didn't work out so well. Her manager insisted that we do it in the green room of this venue in Ramona, California, which was a little bit of a hike to get up there. And just as the interview started, the drummer started doing sound check. And I don't think we got but like 40 seconds out of that whole interview. So I tried for several years to do a second one, which we finally were able to do. She's very gracious. She had given us extra time for this one, knowing that the first one wasn't all that great. And I just loved it. And she's a very compelling person, so it felt like I was talking to an old friend.
Yeah, and the story we're going to hear, I just think is so phenomenal, and especially for young women in the music industry and outside of the music industry, quite frankly. There was just a little tugged on my heartstrings just a little bit. And I just think not only that, but now her passion for the program and her buy-in for NAMM's Oral History and everything that we do is just so uplifting, and it's just so great of her to be so vested in what's going on in this room. So let's hear from Lita Ford's 2017 interview.
When I was a kid, I wanted an electric guitar, and my mother kept buying me acoustics. I don't even know what they were, what their names were. They were just some Sears model, some Sears brand. And I didn't want to hurt her feelings. So I took the first guitar that she gave me and I played it for a year. That made me 12 years old. Second guitar I got, I said, Mom, can't you buy me one with steel strings? Trying to hint that I wanted an electric guitar. So she buys me another acoustic with steel strings. And I'm thinking, oh, Jesus, I can't ask her a third time. I got to go out and get a job. So I'm 14, and I go out and I get a job working in St. Mary's Medical Center as one of the food assistants. I was pushing the food carts around to all the patients. And I saved up $375, and I bought myself my first Gibson SG, chocolate Gibson SG. But I didn't have an amplifier to play it out of. So my father, one day I came home, and my father had purchased a Sony reel-to-reel tape recorder, which was probably about this big, and it had big speakers it dismantled, and then there was the tape reel-to-reel on the inside with all the controls and stuff. And I get home and I hear, Lita Ford, come into the house. I'm thinking, what the heck is that? You know, and he says it again, Lita Ford, come into the house. House. It had a delay on it. I'm thinking, delay? Recorder? There's my amplifier. Dad, can I borrow that? Can I play with it? So I took it out from the front house, which was their main hang, and to the back house, which was my main hang, where I could make all my noise and be a teenager. And so I took it out there. My dad never got it back. And I plugged my guitar into it, slapped on the echo, and it sounded great. It was amazing. So I kept it. $600 for a Sony reel-to-reel. Crazy.
It was awfully patient of your dad to let you take it.
You know, they were my biggest fans. They were really my biggest fans. And anything that I wanted and anything that had anything to do with music, they supported me 100%. It didn't matter if it meant taking away his Sony reel-to-reel. He was all for it.
That's awesome. That's such a great story. She is so fun. Isn't that neat? Yeah. Down to earth and very open about her past. She's great.
And I think not only what's so cool about that is not only the support from her parents, obviously. Look at that, 2 guitars in a short amount of time span when she was a kid, and then, you know, lending her the reel-to-reel, knowing when she asked to borrow it, they weren't going to get it back. Let's be honest. I just think that that's phenomenal. But more than that, the engineering mindset.
Yes,
I mean, to be able to look at a piece of equipment and go, well, it's doing this, but I want it to do that. My brain doesn't work like that, so it blows my mind when other people can see stuff like that.
Well, and then you compare that, because I totally agree with you, and that's one of the things that really made me want to have that story documented, which hadn't been previously that often, is the mindset there of now you can start understanding where these ideas come from with all of these riffs that she came up with when she was doing her heavy metal playing years later. I mean, she came up with some clever things that have been imitated many, many times. And you think, gosh, where the heck did that come from? Well, that mind is always thinking about, well, that's been done. Oh, how about this? Mm-hmm. Very, very clever, amazing talent.
Yeah. So big thanks to Lita for sharing that story with Dan and allowing us to document it.
Absolutely. And thanks for picking that one. That was a goodie.
Yeah, I was excited. All right, Dan. Second, well, technically third, but second pick.
Doc didn't talk, so that doesn't count.
But you plugged him awfully hard. I mean, I'm just saying.
That's how we got into the band. Okay, second clip is from Charles Connor, who was the original drummer for Little Richard when Little Richard started recording in New Orleans, this interesting thing called rock and roll. They were calling it jump blues or rhythm and blues at the time. And it, of course, changed the way we all think of popular music. And Charles was there on drums. Now, interestingly enough, I came to find him as a night watchman at a radio station in Los Angeles, almost completely forgotten about the earlier part of his career. Even people that worked with him didn't realize that he was on some of the records that they were playing at that very station. So it was really neat to kind of bring that out and document some of his stories. And it wasn't just our interview, but several others around that same time helped really put him back on the map. And he's been touring and does some gigs. He wrote a really great, fascinating book. So very, very interesting guy. And I love this clip because he explains the different styles of music that he was playing and that were available at the time, and how he came up with the choo-choo beat that, of course, are 16th notes, but he calls it the choo-choo beat, and it's awesome. It's very simplistic in some respects, but of course it was the right thing at the right time to be a cornerstone in the birth of rock and roll.
Come with me, I want to talk to you. So Richard drove, he had a car, and he had old Packer, a 50, 49 Pack or something like that. And he wasn't a good driver, because I remember one time he had 5 cars at the post office at one time. Boom, 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 boom. And he brought me to the train station. He said, now, I want you guys to look different. I want you guys to sound different. And I can't make you guys get your hair curled if you don't want you to get your hair curled. But I want you to put makeup on and everything like that and loud clothes. He said, but Charles, come here. I want to talk to you about something. I said, now he got me here all by, what do you want to talk to me about? Let's go back to the train station. I said, we just left the train station 2 days ago. He said, no, I want you to hear something. He's a brilliant, Richard is a brilliant guy. He's brilliant, man, you know. And so what happened was, he said, you see the way that train is pulling off? You know, he said, now watch when it pick up speed. I'm going to go in a car, and he drove about a mile when the train was picking up speed, and the train went. He said, that's the beat I want you to do. And he said, I don't know the notes, but that's what I want you to sound. When we have rehearsal next Saturday, he told me, I want you to play that beat. I said, man, what is this guy? I never heard nobody play no beat. Because those days, all they had was the fast domino beat, like, I found my thrill on Blueberry Hill. And then they had the boogie woogie beat. I heard that. Then they had the walk beat. And then the other beat what they had was they had the swing beat, like, you know, like Count Basie or Stan Kenton or Duke Ellington or Buddy Johnson Band or these big bands, like, you know. But they didn't have no backbeat. I said, what the hell do you want me? Man, what you talking about? But I know what he was talking about. He wanted 8 notes. And so, if you remember back there in those days, that's how Richard, all his tunes start off with his fast tune. He said, you know, like the choo-choo train. Those are 8 notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So you accent on the 2 and the 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. But I'm doing the same thing, and that's a very difficult beat to play because you're really working your wrists, and it's tiresome. But I developed that, and I created that beat, which you cannot copyright a beat. So I created that beat, and that's where all this song come from. Like, good golly, Miss, or Lucia, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Choo 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 choo. That's the choo choo train beat.
I think we need some commentary from the drummer in the group.
That's so great. It's just, I mean, everything he says is right. I mean, it's there. Nobody was playing anything like that back in the day. I mean, it was all just standards. Like, he did what everybody else did. So that's really crazy. What's the background on the guy he was talking about that brought him to the train station?
That's
Do you know?
Little Richard.
Oh, Little Richard. Oh,
Yeah.
I know who that is.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah, he calls him Richard. Very, very fascinating story.
That's a good WebClips pick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a goodie.
Yeah. All right, where do you want to go next, Mike?
I think I'll plug the one that I was going to pick.
Okay.
And that is Dan's interview with Elliot Easton, who is the guitarist in the band The Cars. And the interview with him was done in November of 2016. And the reason why I like this web clip so much is because Elliot really paints a picture of the relationship between music stores and kids that go into music stores wanting to be musicians. And growing up in a music store, this just really resonated with me. And it's kind of the ultimate dream for anyone that works or owns a music store, you know. And I'm just going to let the clip tell the story.
One town away from where I grew up was called North Massapequa, Seaford, Plainview area, and that's where Bernie Grayson lived. So For some reason, Bernie took a shine to me, and he could tell how serious and how passionate I was about guitars. I drove him crazy, calling him every other day to see if my guitar was coming. Because I'm left-handed, everything has to be custom built. And I used to take the bus, the Sunrise Highway bus, to go to Grayson's music store, and just to be around guitars. I didn't have a job there. I didn't have any reason. Nobody was making me go there. But I'd go there and I'd sweep the floor, and I'd help Danny with stock. Now roll up to about 1979. The first Cars record came out. It was very successful. It was multiple platinum, and things were just going great. And Gibson flew me out to the NAMM show. At that time, Summer NAMM was at McCormick Place in Chicago. So I'm standing around in a booth talking to someone, and I see across the floor, I see Bernie Grayson. I'm like, oh my God, I got to go over and say hi to Bernie. So I really didn't even know if he'd remember me or not. So I went over and he was like, hello. And I said, Bernie, I don't know if you're going to remember me. My name's Elliot. I used to drive you crazy with left-handed guitars, and you were so kind to me, and you drove me home, and I ordered, and he stopped me in mid-sentence, and he turns to his wife, who's like 20 feet away, he goes, honey, come here, this is the kid I used to tell you about. And he had tears in his eyes. He was so happy to see me, and that things had worked out well for me, and that my band was making it and everything, and oh my gosh, what a reunion.
I just think that's so great. Like that's really the ultimate goal of like anyone working in a music store. It's like, yeah, it's fun to be around the gear all day, but when a kid that comes into your store is really into music and really wants to pursue it, you do like everything you can to get that kid where he needs to be. And just hearing a success story like this one, you know, him becoming part of one of the most popular bands at the time, putting out multi-platinum records, and then bumping into the guy that gave him his start at a music store. It's just like so cool.
Absolutely.
And I think it's even cool that like this, from Elliot's point of view, like the celebrity that is the music store owner who remains that icon and is to the point where like he's this famous musician and he bumps into him and I have to stop and say hello.
Yeah,
like,
right.
You can tell what an impact that shop and that team made on his life, you know, and he never forgot it. And I just think holds a lot of potential.
Yeah, and I think the same goes for any successful music store and for any professional musician. You always remember the first music store that you went to. Absolutely. And the first instrument you bought. And you remember the guy's name and what day it was and all that stuff. It's just one of those moments that you never really forget.
And I don't think you find that really in any other, you know,
right.
I don't know if you want to call it a hobby or activity or a passion. Like, not a lot of athletes remember where they got their first baseball glove from or something like. It's just that it's a different world to some degree.
And he's such an interesting guy. You know, he's been at so many NAMM shows. The very first NAMM show I went to, I got to meet him. He was behind a booth. And, you know, ever since then, I thought, I kind of know this guy. You know, you're kind of proud to, you know, I go to the NAMM show and I get to hang out with people like Elliot Easton. During that same interview that you got that clip from, he told me one line that I just have never forgotten, completely outside of music. But he says, you know, there's really only one difference between Jewish people and Italians. He said, it's the soup.
Now I get the note on his piece of paper that just says soup. And I was like, is he daydreaming about lunch? I don't know what's going on. Okay, soup. All right. Well, he must know. So that was Mike's and therefore my second pick since we got lumped in together. And let's round out Dan's choice for this episode for his favorite web clip.
Well, we have two interviews with Clora Bryant that are on the NAMM website, and I'd like to play a segment from the first one that Mike just recently was able to post for us, which is awesome. Do you happen to know what year that one was?
That was 2003.
She came to the NAMM building here in Carlsbad, California, and we did this interview. And there's a couple of things to say about Clora. Clora the trumpet player, jazz trumpet player, who got her first start in the Baptist church where she grew up, and started playing in an all-girls band called the Sweethearts of Rhythm, which were very popular, these old girl bands, especially during World War II when most of the men were drafted. The women filled in and created these bands that toured around. And the Sweethearts of Rhythm were primarily African-American women that traveled around and had a radio program and even did some great recordings. A very tight band. So she was sort of a ringer for that band for several years, and then she got her own recording career, went on to do Ed Sullivan appearances. She did an awesome imitation of Louis Armstrong, his voice and everything. And I got to know her over several years down here in San Diego at different programs that she would come to. And really a very compelling person. And she's probably best known now and getting a lot of credit these days for being one of the pioneers of the LA jazz scene called Central Avenue, which was a couple of streets in LA that really focused on the progression of jazz during the 1950s and 60s and included bebop and free jazz, and really opened up that whole genre to a whole new audience. So she gets a lot of credit, rightfully so, for that. But the clip I would like to play is actually, it harkens to a whole concept of the oral history program that is very, very meaningful to me, and that is gaining people's perspective on other people and, influences and folks that really made a difference. Because, of course, starting the program in 2000, we couldn't possibly have interviewed all the important musicians and music makers. So many had left us before then. But to have the opportunity to talk to people like Laura about some of her mentors and special people is particularly meaningful to me. And this one is, I happened to ask her about a friend named Jonah Jones, who was a trumpet player in doing very similar things to Central Avenue, only in New York on 52nd Street. Jonah was a very well-known lead trumpeter for the Cab Calloway Orchestra in the 40s. He had a big hit with Minnie the Moocher. That's Jonah playing the lead trumpet on that tune. And had a series of million-selling albums in the 1950s, including one called Muted Jazz. In fact, an interesting side note, Jonah was the very first person to receive a Grammy Award. On the very first broadcast of the Grammys, it was for a jazz record was the first category, and he was the guy who won. A song that you never hear anymore. I can't figure out why. It's called I Dig Chicks. But anyway, so here is a clip of Clara Bryant talking about Jonah Jones.
Jonah is one of our legends. A lot of people don't know about Jonah. Jonah Jones. That's that round face guy. I can see that smile. I love that smile. And he had a sound, and he would be changing his mute so fast I couldn't keep up with him, He was a mute person. He'd go from the harmon to the straight to the bucket, and I said, oh my goodness. But he had a different trumpet sound for each mute. Like if I play the harmon, it's still a trumpet sound but it's a harmon, that rattly sound is there, or the straight mute is, that tinny sound is there. But he had a Jonah sound for each one of those mutes that he played, and he's the only one that I know. Miles had his sound on the harmon mute, but otherwise, it was definitely his sound on the harmon, and when he played open, it was the same sound. But most trumpet players, when they play different mute, it's a different sound for each one. And then when they played without a mute, it's a different sound. But Jonah, he had the same sound. That's one thing I can say about him. I heard him mostly on recordings, because he was from back east. But the time up in Seattle, before we opened, after he closed, my brother and I would get off from work and go by and see him, and I sit there and say, I used to listen to this man in the 30s, It was amazing. And it feels feel like a part of him now. Just to hold his horn, you know. Yeah, I'm gonna give it a little hug.
What I guess you can't see is that she was holding Jonah's 1938 Olds trumpet during the interview.
And she did actually give it a hug.
Thanks for letting me share that. That's a favorite moment for me.
All right, last one of the episode. Mike and I picked this one, but I think we have to say collectively.
This is such a legendary interview.
Yeah.
It comes with a story, and we need to tell the story leading up to this interview.
Yeah.
So who wants to tell it?
Dan's preparing himself.
No, I don't want to. You guys picked it. You tell the story.
Okay, I think you should tell it, Elizabeth.
Yeah. Okay. There we were. No, I'm sorry. Let me set the stage for you. No, so we met this legendary musician, saxophonist, and flautist back in 2017 when the three of us got to travel to Nashville for the Summer NAMM show. And Dan was nice enough to make sure we got out to Nashville just a touch early so we could explore the Musicians Hall of Fame. So shout out to the team over there because that is such a cool space.
Sure is.
And so we coordinated a little behind-the-scenes tour out there for the three of us with the curator. And we were walking around, and if you haven't been out there, each kind of gallery or exhibit area is set up by, how would you term it?
I think by location, right?
By location, like famous recording.
Like they had like a Muscle Shoals area. They had like the Motown and all of like the legendary studios set up in like their own certain sections.
Yeah, and then what's cool about that place is it's not just famous instruments, it is the instrument.
Right.
They pride themselves on getting the guitar heard on this record or the, I don't know, set of drums or from Woodstock.
They had studio walls.
Yeah, it was
like,
really...
It was hardcore.
I'm telling you,
cool.
And so we're kind of buzzing through there, and we hit into the Wrecking Crew section, which is, at LA, and we're talking and chatting and looking at the displays. And Dan happens to pull out his phone and start taking a photo of a display, and he's talking with the curator who's giving us a tour and mentions that he's always hoped to meet the iconic Jim Horn. And he's been trying to locate him for so long, and he's just always wanted to interview him, and he's gushing, and they're going back and forth, and the guy's kind of indicating, the curator's kind of indicating that he might know someone that might be able to get him his email address. I don't know, we'll see what we can do. And in the midst of it all, the curator steps away because he's got to go say hello to someone, which is pretty typical. I mean, they're doing us a favor. We don't mind. We can keep ourselves busy. Not out of trouble, but
definitely in trouble.
Yeah. And so he steps away, and he comes back up behind us and, taps Dan on the shoulder and says, "Hey, I have someone here. I'd like to meet you." And who does it happen to be? Jim Horn. The Jim Horn. It happened to walk in.
Our timing was so perfect.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah, so Jim was in the Musicians Hall of Fame to show some friends of theirs. He was with his wife to show some friends of theirs who were in town his kind of display, his little corner of the display case that had some of his instruments. And so, of course, Mike and I see what's about to happen. We can see the writing on the wall, which is Dan whipping out his business card, trying to slide in there and secure that interview. And he is... always be closing. ABC always be closing, Dan. So Mike and I kind of get the curator to continue on with the tour so that way Dan has a few moments to chat with Jim.
And I went up to him and I said, "I've always wanted to interview you. I'm Dan with NAMM." He goes, "Really? I've always wanted to go to NAMM." I'm like, maybe we could work something out. He and his wife and their friends badges for the next day, and the next day we happened to find a space in the schedule to do an interview with Jim Horn.
Yeah, it's just, it was probably one of the first real bonding experiences, I think, the collective stories that the three of us had that now gets referenced fairly frequently in the office. So,
and I think it's a favorite web clip more so because of the context than the actual content. But as you'll hear from this, the content's still amazing. I mean, he is a legend. So Let's hear from Jim Horn.
I started with piano, didn't really care for it when I was 8 years old. Then I went to 10 years old, I went to trumpet, and that was miserable, you know, on your chops. And so I started listening to records. A lot of R&B records always had a sax solo on them. And I loved those bluesy sax solos. So at 12, I started playing saxophone, and my mom said, well, you can't play it unless you take lessons, learn how to read, and learn how to play it properly. So she was, you know, great for me at that time. So I really got hooked on music and listening to the radio, and just kept playing saxophone until I got better and better. And then by the time I was a teenager, I had a little band, and we would play for dances at school. And I was reading all the music, you know, the melodies. And we didn't ad-lib much in those days, just played melodies. And so I went through school playing, and right up until the end of my senior year, Dwayne Eddy's manager called me and said that they needed a saxophone player. And so I flew to Phoenix with my flat top haircut and crew cut, you know. And Dwayne always had that real perfect hair, you know. And so he took one look at me, and I was a little startled. I'm 6'3", you know. So I started playing saxophone, and he said, well, it'll do for now, you know, because we got to fly to Brooklyn, do the Brooklyn Fox with Alan Freed. So that was the beginning of my career, but I had to convince my folks that I need to go. I'm going to New York. This is what I want to do. So I went ahead, and it just went from there, you know, into the studio scene with Dwayne. And then I started meeting musicians and contractors. These are the people that contract sessions. They'll call a rhythm section and horn section, whatever they need. And so I met a few contractors that really helped me out. And then I met Hal Blaine, and there was a few other musicians as well that helped me out, and Hal was the best at it. I mean, he just said, man, you guys got to be using Jim Horn here. He plays flute and sax, clarinet, and he doubles on everything. And so I learned how to play oboe, English horn. Everybody said, the more instruments you can play, the more calls you're going to get. So I was on the Carpenters records playing the oboe and English horn and the flutes, and then Fifth Dimension, you know, went in there. We played flutes on all their hits, and it just snowballed. You know, I was determined. My father always told me to be the best at you want to be. Whatever you're going to be the best at it. You know, he was a brick mason. He was a very good one, but I didn't want to go that route, you know. So I just really, I was determined, you know, and I think you have to have that. If you're going to be a session player, you have to show up sober, you know. We got on a Frank Sinatra session on Strangers in the Night. I was probably in my mid-20s or something, you know, and not green, but I was able to read and everything, and I just wanted to play the best for the producer, Jimmy Bowen. And so Frank Sinatra, he had 2 or 3 thugs, big guys from New York, you know, always around him, watching, you know, taking care of him. One of them came over and to the you know, the horn section and said, all right, guys, nobody talk to Frank, okay? And we said, okay, fine, you know, we won't say a word. Nothing. We said, okay, fine. So what happens? Sinatra sees the horn section, because he was in those big bands for years, and he loves horn players. Comes over and comes up to me and says, nice to have you here. And I said, well, thank you, Mr. Sinatra. No, call me Frank. And he went to each horn player like that, and he said, see that bar over there? You guys get over there, get you a taste, get a drink, and come right back and let's cut this turkey. And I did not move out of my chair. I wasn't going to go over there and start juicing and getting drunk before a session with Sinatra, you know. But boy, the trumpet players, one of them was from, Conrad Gazzo was from New York. He leaped down, practically knocked everybody out of the way to get to that bar. So the trumpet players over there having a great time. We come back, we cut Strangers in the Night, big hit. You know, Jimmy Bowen knew how to cut hits. So I was working with the right people at the right time. You know, Glenn Campbell, he'd always say, hey, you guys got to be calling Jim Horn, man. He's the best. You got to call Jim Horn. So between him and Hal Blaine, man, I mean, my career just really took a big launch. And from Duane Eddy into all that, it was the beginning of it, you know.
Yeah, it reminds me of...
I love it.
It reminds me of the web clip we have with John Jorgensen, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it's in the web clip, but it's definitely in his interview where he accepts a position at Disneyland playing banjo and bluegrass mandolin. And he said, I accepted it. And the next day I thought, you know, I should really buy a mandolin and learn how to play it. It's just crazy, these guys that
have that
learn
talent.
so many. Like,
Yeah.
I can understand learning a couple instruments. You know, I've done it myself, but just being able to say, you know what, I should probably learn some more, and just picking up random instruments and
like
just
the oboe. I just picked that up. People go
that's
to
not
school
an instrument
for years
you pick
to
up.
learn
Like,
that.
yeah, crazy.
Yeah, very compelling guy. That's neat. Thanks for sharing that one, you guys. That was good.
Yeah, so that kind of rounds out our top 6 favorite interview web clips, and we appreciate you guys joining and listening us recount those stories for you. And these, along with 3,000 plus more, are all on our website, which you can check out at www.namm.org/library. Thanks. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Take care.
Bye.